Chapter 1, Introduction, Luna. My name is Luna, and I am a gray wolf. Our territory is large and peaceful. It had a wide river running through it that eventually led to the lake, a cozy den, and enough trees to hide behind during hunting season. Our territory is large, but not that large where you could easily get lost. It is the perfect sized territory. Usually we migrate to a different spot once a year, but we've stayed in this area for over 2 years. My dad and mom are the alpha male and female. I have 2 siblings, Charlie and Albert, and some other cub friends. Lulu, Ash, Blizzard, Tundra, and Howl were our best friends, though slightly older. We constantly played with each other, from tag to dominance games. We had 12 pack members, not including the elders and us wolf cubs. Mom and Dad were the alpha male and female. A very smart and stern wolf called Akira was the beta. Apollo the playful but very clever red wolf was Delta. Loki was the lead warrior. A bunch of other adult gray wolves were warriors. Akira and Snow were healers, and Cider and Silver were the Omegas, and our babysitters. The elders were more known as the Wolf Council. Wolves constantly came to ask their advice or opinion. The head chief of the Wolf Council, Cobalt, was my dad's dad, or my grandfather. He was the oldest pack member, and I feared that a more dominant dog would soon rally him out of the pack. But this was unlikely, since Cobalt was liked by many. He had been in very many previous packs, so he knew a lot about nature, wolves, and hunting. He used to be the alpha when he formed the pack, but when Juno, his wife, and my grandma gave birth to their first litter, he chose that my dad would become the next alpha. Many of the wolves in our pack know his name, but call him the Old Wise Wolf. I just call him Grandfather. Our pack was active, alert, and very cheerful. It was only as strong as its weakest member, so teamwork was the #1 rule in our strong wolf pack. We had scents and trail markers everywhere you could imagine, and if a stranger wolf wandered into our territory, it was immediately attacked and driven out of the area. The Wolf Council stayed nearly always in the den, but with the exception of the Old Wise Wolf, who taught us lessons every day. Mom and Dad would sit on their usual big rock and observe from above. Akira the beta would prance around, occasionally stopping to lick Dad's mouth in a sign of ranking and respect. Apollo would help anyone who was in trouble, particularly us cubs. We were always up to mischief. Loki and his warriors spent most of their time standing on the borderline, watching for intruders or prey. If they spotted a moose or a likely victim, they would call out to one another in charge. Akira and Snow, female and male, were the healer couple. They spent their time in the den, waiting for a wolf to come in injured. They were masters at healing, so the wolf pack could not afford to let them go out. The risk of them being attacked was very likely, and the wolf pack could collapse if there were no healers. Cider and Silver were the Omegas, the lowest rank in our pack except for the elders and wolf cubs. They had a very positive and passionate energy, and they would cheer up any wolf that was feeling down. They would have no right over anyone in the pack except for the cubs. They spent their entire time in the den, taking care and keeping an eye on us wolf cubs. Whenever the warriors would drag back a large buffalo or moose, they would always eat last, therefore getting the smallest and leanest portions of food. They were at terrible risk of dying during poor hunting seasons. I like Silver. He's cool, calm, and serene. He was kicked out of a pack before he came to our pack, and we enjoyed listening to his tales of escaping, swimming across a strong river with rapids, and so on. Cider, on the other hand, is a little too enthusiastic. Sure, she's great and all, but it's annoying how she treats us like babies. We're almost teenagers now. Well, that's our wolf pack. Chapter 2, The Old Wise Wolf's Lesson. We gathered onto the grassy area of our territory, excited. Albert, Lulu, Ash, and Tundra were grinning, and so was I. It was time for Grandpa's lesson. Grandpa's lessons weren't boring or uninteresting, on the contrary, they were quite the opposite. I liked how Grandpa's lessons were so interactive. He always asked us questions and our opinions on the lesson. Maybe figuring out which berry is poisonous or not is boring to you, but Grandpa makes everything so much more fun, even when he is very old. I have been waiting for this lesson for a long time, ever since Grandpa announced it. The challenge was all about strength. The river that ran through our territory was quite wide, and, at the moment, very rough. I assumed that was of the serious thunderstorm yesterday night. I looked around. Grandpa had not arrived yet. I always liked getting to lessons early, to observe things. Albert, Lulu, Ash, and Tundra were also looking around excitedly, glancing repeatedly at the river. Only Ash looked nervous. I knew why. Ash was the run of the litter. Lulu, Howl, Tundra, and Blizzard were big and strong, but Ash was very small and quite weak. When she was born, everyone thought she would not make it. But she did, and here she was. Ash was sweet and silly, but a bit timid at times. I mean, most times. I understood why this lesson made her so nervous. Swimming across the very rough water would be a very difficult challenge for her, judging by her size and strength. I passed her a smile, and she gave me a very uncertain one in return. Oh well. Perhaps Grandpa would make it a little easier for her. Where's Howl, Charlie, and Blizzard? Albert asked. I knew where they were. They were playing dominance over one another. We were all best friends, but Howl, Charlie, and Blizzard were completely inseparable. Albert was their friend too, but he was a bit more quiet and nerdy than those three. The three boys were never seen without each other. They loved to play dominance games with each other. They would mouth and snarl, trying to beat the other cub. Howl definitely lived up to his name. He was the biggest of the litter, despite of the fact that he was third oldest. He was a very good howler. Charlie was perhaps tied with Blizzard. They looked almost identical. They might have been passed for twins. They were both very strong, very smart, and very athletic for their age. Oh, here they are, Tundra said, nudging her nose towards the boys, who raced over happily. Hey guys, Charlie said, grinning at the girls and Albert. Lulu flashed him a perfect smile. Lulu had a crush on Charlie for years. I almost choked when she confessed. And she almost choked when I admitted that I liked Blizzard. A little bit. The lesson started yet? Hal replied, turning his nose upward. I always admired him for that. I had never been able to do that trick. Duh, no, Lulu answered, eyeing Charlie. It slightly broke my heart. I knew that Charlie liked another girl. Tundra. And yet Lulu tried to impress him with everything she could. I was pretty sure Tundra was unaware of the fact that Charlie liked her and not Lulu. Guess what we were doing? Blizzard began. Let me guess, Tundra said in a sarcastic voice. More dominance. How did you know? Hal and Charlie said together. Guys, get it together. None of you are becoming alphas, okay? Not for a long time. Save the dominance games for when one of you is an alpha. Or maybe you won't become alpha. Exasperated, Lulu cut in before her older sister could say anything. The three looked highly offended. Albert tried to break the silence. Here's grandfather, he said, striding over to him to say hello. I glanced at Ash. She let out a little squeak of terror. Good morning, children, Grandpa said politely. Good morning, old wise wolf, we chanted, bowing our heads in a very submissive way to him. Thank you, children, he said in a calm voice. I believe that you have all heard of today's lesson. We all nodded eagerly, except for Ash, who shrunk back against Lulu. Good. I know that you all know how to swim. Wolves are born knowing how to swim, he added for the 100th time. But I have never taught you to swim against strong currents and river rapids. This river is usually smooth, but the thunderstorm made it upset. Just remember, slow and steady. Do not rush. Try to not think that there is a current pulling you. Pretend that you are swimming across a smooth, serene lake. Just relax, and you will make it. Ash looked as though this was entirely impossible. Now I will demonstrate for you, Grandpa said, and, without a warning, he tread into the water and began to swim. I admired his work. He was slow, but he was making progress. His paws moved steadily in the water, despite the current. Once he reached the other side, Grandpa used his front paws to latch onto the ground as he climbed. Then he fully got out and shook his wet fur. There you go, Grandpa said, smiling pleasantly. Which one of you would like to go first? I exclaimed, me, but Charlie ran towards the water without asking. Grandpa said, frowning slightly. He used that noise to say that he was not pleased. Charlie slowly walked backwards, looking slightly put out. Yes, Luna, you may go first, Grandpa said. Charlie looked disappointed that he was not first. I grinned, and instead of carefully walking into the water, I hopped into it and swam across. I tried to imagine exactly what Grandpa said. I was talking a nice swim in the peaceful lake. I did not even seem to notice that there was a current. I reached the other side in seconds, hopped out confidently, and shook myself. The class cheered for me. "Great job, Luna." "Nice one." "Wow, that was fast." "Charlie," Grandpa said, smiling in approval at me, "you may go now." Charlie charged towards the water like a bull charging at a red flag. He jumped in almost too enthusiastically, sending a wave of water onto the others. They shrieked and laughed as he crossed the river much faster than I had, and jumped back out. "5 seconds, Charlie," Grandpa said, winking at his grandson. "Thanks, G-Pa," Charlie said casually, shaking himself. I shot him a look of annoyance. You were supposed to respect your elders. But Grandpa merely laughed and beckoned for Tundra to go. Tundra, Howl, Blizzard, Lulu, and Albert all passed successfully, Albert a little slower than the rest. "Ash, dear, now it's your turn," Grandpa called, looking a little worried. We gathered around one another, congratulating and licking. Then we all turned and looked expectantly at little Ash, who approached the water and staring down at it as though it was poisonous. "Come on, dear," Grandpa commanded gently but firmly. "Is it deep?" Ash hesitated. 6, maybe 7 feet deep, Grandpa assured her. Ash shivered. "That's deep," she said, backing away from the water with her tail between her legs. "Come on, you can do it," Grandpa said, and looked at us for help. "Come on, Ashy, you got this. You can do it. Go, Ash. Just pretend it's smooth." "I'm not good at pretending," Ash cried shrilly, panicking. Grandpa moved closer to the water. "I'll be right here when you come out." "Come on, I'm starving," Charlie complained. Grandpa shot him a look, but that did the trick. Ash suddenly jumped into the cold, bumpy water and disappeared. "Where is she?" Blizzard asked concernedly, scanning the water's surface. Only Grandpa looked unnerved. "Give her a few minutes." I stared for that little familiar gray head to pop up. I saw bubbles appear, but no Ash. "Where is she?" Albert and Lulu said together, not being able to hold it any longer. "Give her a few minutes," Grandpa repeated. For the first time, I was annoyed with my grandfather. Ash clearly needed help. How couldn't he see that? She was going to drown because of him. Just when I was about to jump into the water to rescue her, Ash suddenly flung herself out of the water. She sailed gracefully and landed on the other side of the river. Grandpa looked triumphant. "Lesson's over. Good day to you, children. Reminder, tomorrow is a review of studying fungi." As he calmly left, we surrounded little soaked Ash. "Ash! What happened there?" We all fired questions at her like bullets from a pistol. My back paw was stuck under a sharp rock underwater, Ash began, enjoying the sudden attention. And I managed to get it out, so then I pushed my back legs against the bottom and jumped out of the water. Tundra shook her head in disbelief. "Come on, guys, let's go eat," she said. Tundra, Lulu, and I, the three besties, smiled at each other and began to walk over to the den. Howl, Charlie, and Blizzard followed us. On the way, I heard them talking about us. Chapter 3, Tag. "You're it." "Tag." "You're it." "That didn't count." I cried shrilly, my stomach hurting from laughing so hard. "That was the tip of your tail." Charlie protested. "Nice try," I smirked warmly. "Fur doesn't count." He looked around in disbelief. "What? Who made up that rule?" "Me," I said, and everyone laughed. We were playing tag in the small grassy area near the den. Charlie was it, but he managed to grab the tip of my fluffy gray tail as I zigzagged away. That was my secret trick. Unfortunately, Agile Charlie caught on. I hated when he was it. He would always directly target someone until they were caught. In this case, that cub was me. "Luna, come on, you haven't been it yet," Tundra urged. She had been running hard. Her long pink tongue dangled out of her mouth as she stood there, panting. "Yeah," Charlie echoed. I shot an annoyed look at him. He might have been willing to compromise if it weren't for Tundra. "Fine," I grumbled. Unbeknownst to the rest, I rapidly muttered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 0, and lunged towards Lulu. Lulu let out a shriek of delight as she began to thunder away from me. Lulu was the second smallest wolf in our group, but she was incredibly fast, just like lightning. She, Charlie, Howl, Tundra, Blizzard, and I were definitely the quickest runners. Ash was very slow, judging by her size. I gave up on her as she ran back around the den, and began advancing towards Ash. Ash knew that the game had begun, but she did not see me anywhere. She sat down in the warm grass and licked her little paw. I creeped in the grass, low to the ground, like Grandfather had taught. "Always be quiet while hunting," he had said. I got into a good attacking position and leaned down more, eyes never leaving my prey, waiting for the right moment. Grandfather said always to be patient when hunting, or else you'd scare away your victim at the wrong time. I learned all of this at one of his lessons, of course. Right as Ash paused, I sprang. I executed my timing perfectly. I pounced on the little wolf cub, and she became so scared, Ash began to wail. I looked around helplessly as Howl, Blizzard, and Charlie, best buddies, emerged from behind the trees. Lulu raced out from behind the den. Tundra and Albert popped out from behind the tall, smooth rock. The alphas would sit there. "Great," Howl said sarcastically as Ash bawled anew. "Let's throw her into the river," Albert suggested meekly. "Albert." All of the girls cried at once in shock. This was surprising. Albert was such a softy. Why not? That'll shush her up, Blizzard said, but that topic dropped. Pups, said a deep voice. We all looked up and saw the alpha male, Dad, coming toward us. This was unusual. The higher-ranking wolves never came near us. That was a job for Silver and Cider, and sometimes the healers. Hey, Dad, I said before anyone could say anything. What's up? I have some news, he said. Oh. Last time we had news, we migrated about 1,000,000 miles to a different place. My fellow cubs were clearly thinking the same thing, because their expressions were indescribable. Are we migrating? We all asked in unison, then glanced at one another in surprise. Dad smiled. No. Funny you say, I was considering changing locations. We all groaned. But that is highly unlikely. His smile grew brighter. This is good news. Great news. Terrific news. We all went quiet, pondering. What could possibly be so terrific? Someone's joining the pack? Lulu finally asked. Good guess, but no. Was someone kicked out of the pack? Hal asked. No. Everyone is safe and in their right place. Okay, so what? Ash suddenly spoke in a high-pitched voice. We all turned around. I had forgotten her until that moment. The alpha female is having cubs. Dad's smile changed to a big, handsome, proud alpha grin. I often admired that handsome, bold look. Congratulations, Tundra said. Thank you, Dad said, grinning broadly. In fact, she's having them in about a week, so make sure to give her plenty of room and space. If she needs anything, give it to her. The alpha female need lots of rest. Okay, we all echoed. Inwardly, I was feeling a little sad. Why would Dad announce the news at the very end? But I was excited. I had never seen my mother have cubs. When Dad walked away, everyone glanced at each other. Finally, Hal spoke. So, new cubs, eh? He repeated. More helpless little brothers and sisters? In his litter, Hal was the second oldest after Tundra, and he hated watching over his younger siblings every single day. I was the youngest in my very small litter, so I did not know how it felt like. Exhausting, probably. In the beginning, yes, they are helpless, Tundra argued, clearly hurt by the words. And don't call them helpless. I mean, they are helpless when they are born, but that is quite rude. But when they grow up, they become clear and strong. Imagine the alpha male as a cub. He was weak and helpless, wasn't he? Then he grew up to be the alpha of his own pack. You never know. Yeah, Hal grumbled. I can hardly wait. Be nice to her, Charlie snapped at him. Do they know how many cubs? Blizzard asked, directing the question at me. Because I was the alpha female's only daughter. I'm not sure, I admitted, feeling ashamed of not knowing. Oh, Blizzard said, smiling at me. The sweet, warm smile made me melt inside. Thanks, anyway. Charlie, who never liked to sit still, gave out a large, clearly fake yawn. All this dumb talk, he said. Are we playing tag, or what? Yeah. We all yelled in delight, and continued playing. Chapter 4, A Large, Dead Buffalo. Loki and the other warriors dragged in a large, dead buffalo. Dad jumped down from his rock, sniffed it, and began eating. The other wolves followed suit. Everyone ate happily, until there were only bones and less flesh left. All the wolves politely stepped aside and let the healers and the Omegas have their share. I felt bad for the Omegas, they always got the least amount of food. The Omegas grabbed a chunk of the remaining flesh and walked back over to us. They dropped it and gestured at us to eat. I looked down at it bitterly. Mom always said we could not eat that kind of hard, raw food yet, it had to be ripped apart for the softer chunks. Silver and Cider seemed to have forgotten. Thankfully, Cider and Silver both finally seemed to get a clue and they gnawed on the hard parts until they turned soft and mushy. I chewed thoughtfully. Buffalo wasn't my favorite, but it wasn't bad either. We often had buffalo for dinner. Buffalo was sometimes pretty easy to catch. Deer were harder. I ripped apart a not-so-soft piece and sank my teeth deep into it to get the best meaty taste. I finished up my dinner and was about to start talking to Tundra and Lulu when Charlie nudged me. What? I asked him sharply. He nodded towards my mom. She lay in the corner of the den, sleeping. The healers were around her, whispering lowly to her. I always thought it was weird why my mom always had litters after litters after litters. Why isn't one litter enough for her? That's enough pups as it is. My litter was very small, but Tundra's was large. And she had had many litters before, but this was the first time I had seen her during having a litter. My head ached at the thoughts. To distract myself, I glanced around the den and noticed Ash. She peeked her head in. Ash was a gray wolf, along with Howl, Lulu, and Blizzard. She had light, fluffy gray fur, true to her name. I was a gray wolf also. They were probably the most common types of wolves in my opinion. All of our pack members are gray wolves except for Tundra, who is an Arctic wolf, and a couple of the lead warriors are different breeds. Ash glanced around the den with her tiny little yellow eyes. Around 8 weeks, our eyes gradually changed from light blue to a golden yellow. We turned 9 weeks today. We were officially in the period called the juvenile period. I was also very excited for tomorrow. Starting tomorrow, each day, when the lead warriors go out for hunting sessions, the alpha male and the beta choose 2 of us to go with them. Also because the old wise wolf/grandfather filled the alphas and high-ranking wolves in on our studies, and how we were succeeding and progressing. That night, I could hardly sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about tomorrow and the adventures we'd have. But I didn't realize that those adventures would turn into pure danger. Chapter 5, Some Competition. My eyes snapped open early in the morning. I unexpectedly sat up and glanced at my fellow cubs. Blizzard was asleep on his back. Howl, Albert, and Lulu were snoring. Tundra and Charlie were asleep next to each other, and Ash was cuddled up to my soft, warm fur. She did this to everybody, no one quite minded it. The reason I woke up so early because, you guessed it, our first annual hunting session. I was slightly disappointed that only 2 of us would get chosen on the first day, and there were a good deal of us, but you never know. Even though I wasn't allowed to go out of the den early in the morning, I peeked my head out. My eyes had to adjust to the brilliant light as I saw streaks of orange and pink across the sky. I watched the beautiful sunrise until I heard a voice behind me. "Luna," said an unrecognizable voice. I whirled around, hearing my name, and saw a tired Ash. She let out a huge yawn and blinked her eyes vigorously, also trying to get used to the morning light. "Hi, Ash," I answered, slightly surprised. She never got up early. Mornings just weren't her thing. "Why are you up so early?" "You woke me up," she murmured, her small black eyes drooping dangerously. "I'm sorry, I apologize. I was just so excited for the hunting sessions to begin." "I'm not," Ash informed me feebly, wobbling tiredly on her legs as though they were not able to handle her weight. "Why not?" I asked the cub, even though I already suspected the answer. I was right. "Because I'm the smallest in the litter and I'll just get behind again and everyone would laugh at me and I would be sad. I mean, I am the youngest in my litter, but so what? I mean, Lulu is second to youngest and she's much bigger than me. I was literally a few seconds born after her. It's not fair. Plus, we'll probably have to swim across rivers even wilder than our river here and I'll probably drown because I'll clearly fail. Because I did so on our last lesson. But you managed to get out." I tried convincing her. "You shot out of the water at the end. That was so cool." Ash looked miserable. "It was an accident," she whispered. "I actually didn't get my paw stuck. I saw a bug floating in the water and freaked out." "Well," I said, recovering from this strange surprise, "you didn't drown, at least." She pretended not to hear me. "And maybe we'll have to identify fungi and berries and mushrooms and maybe something else. And maybe even bugs. I hate bugs." Remember when the old wise wolf gave us a lesson on identifying plants? I almost swallowed poison ivy. The only things I didn't like about Ash. She didn't have self-confidence. She spoke like it was the end of the world even though it wasn't a big deal, aka drama queen, and her favorite words were and maybe. By her favorite words, I mean that she uses them unnecessarily a lot. For example, once she used the word and 1,000 times when listing her fears. Lulu loony Luna, said Howl, sneaking up behind me. If Howl was here, that meant Blizzard and Charlie were with him, too. Don't call me that, Howly, I answered, even though this was my usual remark. He called me Loony Luna every day to irritate me, and I would respond with my name-calling. Howl smirked and winked at me at the same time. Blizzard is so cute, but oh man. Howl's a different definition of handsome. Why are you up so early? Charlie shielded his eyes from the blinding light. Grandfather's lesson. I couldn't contain myself from speaking in a loud, happy voice. They picked 2 cubs to go with them, remember? Starting today, Tundra said, walking out. The yellow light bounced against her snowy white fur, making the overall effect very pretty. I hope I get chosen first, but who knows? I bet they picked the most succeeding in the class to go on the first day. I'm one of them. Charlie ran a paw through his fur. I sighed. It was slightly embarrassing seeing him trying to impress Tundra. Albert showed up, and the group was reunited. Cubs, said a mellow voice. We turned around and smiled at the old wise wolf, who strode around the den. Are we getting started with our lesson, Grandfather? I asked much too quickly. When the time comes, it will come, he said, pausing. Sorry, I apologize. I'm just so excited. This time, he smiled slightly at me. I understand. When I was a young cub, I would also wake up early to my lessons. I'm not excited for the lessons, I'm happy about the hunting sessions. I said out loud, and realized how rude it was to Grandfather, who spent the whole morning teaching us his lessons in any condition. I suddenly wished I could suck back my words like grass. Grass is fun to suck, especially if it's hard and long. It makes a good chew toy. I glanced nervously at my peers as silence fell. Most of them looked afraid of the old wise wolf's reaction. Howl looked smug, as though looking forward to me getting in trouble. Before I could say anything else, I heard a shuffling noise and the alpha male appeared magically in front of us with his trusty beta at his side. At some distance away, Loki followed. I understood why. It was a sign of ranking and respectfulness whenever the higher-ranking wolves would go first or ahead. Hi, Dad, Charlie's voice rang out. Albert and I echoed this as the rest of the cubs mumbled hellos. Dad nodded, clearly pleased. As you know, today is a very special day, he began, as my face lit up. Starting today, each morning you will all be meeting up on this lawn. We will come shortly, and I shall choose who to take within our summer hunting sessions. Summer hunting is usually easy and light. But when cool autumn rolls around, it will get more difficult to hunt in the cold, windy weather conditions, and most of the big animals will begin to hibernate, thus making us forced to hunt other prey. Dad paused, looking at our eager faces. You will go out with us every day, and obey us completely. If we tell you to run, you run. If we tell you to hide, you hide. Later, you will return to your territory by yourself. I know this seems extreme, but I think that you are ready. Babying cubs and thinking that they are still too young, at this age, is unheard of and will not happen in this pack under my direction. I reckon that you memorized all of our scent markings and footprints. You will most likely see one of the warriors or the delta standing on the perimeter line of the territory, so just look after their scents, and you should be fine. I was super confident in the beginning that I would 100% get chosen on the first day, but after this speech I began to doubt my abilities. What if one of us got injured on the way back? What if we get lost? What if another pack of angry, wild wolves find us? What if Dad or someone else dies? What if we die? I dislike what-if questions, because they're usually unrealistic and not practical. The border was safely secured, we weren't hunting too far away from the territory, and I would have won another cub with me. Ever since the thoughts swarmed into my mind, they would not leave, like an angry hive of buzzing bees. Let's see, Dad went silent, looking at all of us, contemplating his choices. I did my best to stand up straight, with my striking blue eyes staring right back at Dad. Glancing around at my fellow cubs, I was slightly disappointed. Lulu was arching her back so far, it looked like she was trying to do a backbend. She had clearly gone too far on the posture thing. Albert had a fake trying to impress grown-ups cheesy grin. But Howl, Tundra, Charlie, and Blizzard looked just like me, strong, important, and confident. I had some competition. So, Tundra and Albert, my dad began, will you have the pleasure of going hunting with Loki, Akira, and the other warriors? Chapter 6, My Talent. My heart seemed to rip in two. I stood there on the cold, wet ground, breathing heavily, eyes widened. It wasn't possible. I had not heard correctly. It had to be me. It had to. It had to. It had to. But no! Albert and Tundra got up and walked over modestly to the older wolves. I had no words. I was positive that they would have picked me. I was the best in the class. Well, Charlie would always beat me at athleticism, but that's not really fair because Charlie can outrun an adult. He has a clear gift, his specialty. Suddenly, it dawned on me, what was my talent? Charlie's was that he was really athletic, as I mentioned before, and Albert was known for being a real nerd. I mean, he's just super smart. Lulu was known for her jokes and she's really good at making everyone laugh. Her jokes are kind of tacky, but they're hilarious at the same time. Tundra is just so nice, sweet, and helpful. She's the ultimate friend that everyone wants to have. Compassion and kindness is her gift. Howl is just about good at everything he tries. Blizzard is really creative. He makes booby traps to trap the enemy wolves, and he usually makes up all our ridiculously awesome games. And as for Ash, well, she doesn't really count. To make my point, what was my talent? I always tried to be nice to wolves, usually, and I can be creative, too. but my creative league was nowhere near Blizzard's. To be honest, I was defeated. So that's why Dad didn't pick me. I wasn't good at anything. And that made me unexplainably sad. Chapter 7, Dad's Talk. "Hey, Luna," Dad said, walking over to me. "We brought back buffalo. You hungry?" "Not really," I mumbled. I sat moodily by the river, skipping stones into the water. "Tundra and Albert did amazing today, have you heard? They finished off the buffalo when we got tired." "That's great, Dad," I said. "But I'm not hungry." I was already super tired of eating buffalo every night, and I wasn't about to sit with my fellow cubs, who were really talented, and I couldn't do anything. I didn't feel like embarrassing myself today. Dad noticed my sour expression. "What's wrong, girly?" "It's just Dash." I glanced into his smart, knowing alpha face. If I told him, he would think I were complaining. If I didn't, he would get annoyed that I was keeping secrets from him. "I know why you didn't pick me, Dad." My voice cracked. "Oh?" Dad looked skeptical. "What do you mean by that?" "It's because I don't have any talents." Dad wrinkled his nose in confusion. "Are you kidding me? You're the most talented cub I know." "But I'm not good at anything," I answered. "Yes, you are," he argued. "There's a whole list." I rolled my eyes. He was just trying to cheer me up because he was my father. 1, you're fast, strong, and athletic," Dad began. "Not as fast as Charlie." "Let's be honest here." Dad made a face as though he was trying not to laugh. "No one can compete with that pup when it comes to racing." I held back a snort/laugh. "You're smart." "Not as smart as Albert." Dad gave me a funny look, but went on and on about my different qualities. "You're creative and outgoing." "Not as creative as Blizzard." Dad looked as if he were about to rip his fur out. "Luna, come on. You know that's not true. You may just not know it yet." "Ha! For some wolves, it takes a while for their true talent to shine through," he explained. "You'll get it, Luna, I promise." I was silent for a moment, thinking something up to argue with his comment. I made that silly worry go away, though, and asked another question that kept bugging me. "Then why did you pick Tundra and Albert?" "Why are you asking?" "Well, you said that the most succeeding and the best of the class would get to go." "I thought I was the best in the class." "I never said the best and most succeeding," Dad pointed out. "Do you recall a time when I said that?" I racked through my brain, but I indeed did not remember him saying those words. "You may have thought that. But that's not what I was certainly thinking." "But why Tundra and Albert? Why not me or someone else?" "It's not who's the best in the class. It's who grows and improves." Albert had always been a bit behind, if you haven't noticed. "You have always been the top, Luna." "I've noticed that." Do you understand what I'm saying? I did. I nodded slowly, realizing his words. It made sense. But Tundra never struggled, did she? Dad's voice was soft. Wolves always struggle, cub. But she was always just so perfect and kind and nice and spectacular and smart. Oh! Was Ash's favorite word finally getting to me? Tundra is a different case, hun. Loud laughter suddenly came from the den. Dad straightened and said, "Come on, let's go get you some dinner." I had never felt so cheered up as I walked back with my dad to the den. Chapter 8, Reacting. So it went on and on like this. After Tundra and Albert, it was Lulu and Charlie. Then Blizzard and Ash. I knew that Howl and I were the last ones. It made me disappointed. Even though I felt better after talking to Dad, I still had my doubts. It pained me deeply to see each pair of cubs walking out to the hunting sessions. I was wounded. Okay, maybe that's a little too far, but I was disappointed. Finally, my day had come. So, Luna and Howl, the alpha announced, "Will you have the pleasure of going hunting with Loki, Akira, and the other warriors?" Yes! I cried in delight. Dad gave me a reproachful look, and I said, a bit more quietly, "Ready for action, sir." Excellent. He smiled his handsome alpha smile. As I got up and walked past Charlie and Blizzard, I heard them whisper, "Ooh, Hal got picked with his girlfriend to go hunting. Oh, what a romantic date." "Shut up," I snarled at them. Then I sneaked a peek at Howl. He marched past his two best friends, his nose high in the air. He didn't care what other wolves thought of him, and that was that. I wished that I had Howl's maturity. Out of the three amigos, he was definitely the smartest and oldest. I, on the other hand, was quite mature for my age, but immediately would react violently if someone provoked me, teased me, etc. I couldn't ignore them or walk away. I simply couldn't. Howl and I were literal opposites of each other, but I still really liked him. Maybe even loved him. Chapter 9, My First Hunting Session. Just remember, being quiet is the most vital thing in hunting, Loki announced. If you're loud, you'll scare away the animals, obviously. When you're running, be quiet, too, or you'll frighten the animals. In pursuit, be light and speedy. Make sure to zigzag, because that'll further confuse the animal. This usually works only on bison, but there's an interesting theory on moose that they'll actually slow down instead of dash. Loki, did you really recite this whole speech with Tundra and Albert, too? I asked as Howl laughed. Loki grinned sheepishly. Well, what can I say? I'm lead warrior. We climbed up a hill. So far, the hunting session was going pretty good. No sight of animals yet. Howl turned out to be a fun companion to hunt with, Loki being super annoying with his nerdy hunting talks, kind of like brainy Albert. The hill was tall and wide. The grass was tall and wet. It had rained earlier today, so I was not surprised. Loki said that wet ground were the worst conditions when hunting, but when Howl asked what to do if there was a tornado, I laughed my head off. The top of the hill gave a perfectly view of the valley below. Thick, bushy pine trees covered the wet, mushy ground, and I could hear the rushing sound of a river. It weaved its way through the forest, then gave open to a large field, and dropped into a huge, crystal-clear lake. Bingo! I saw 3 deer standing around the lake, lapping the cool water with their long pink tongues. A baby foal stood nearby on its wobbly, unsteady legs, and it nursed from its mother, a tall, beautiful female deer with white spots on her backside. The scene was so pretty and so peaceful, I almost felt bad for having to interrupt. I nudged Howl and he followed my gaze. I watched him carefully, and when his striking blue eyes spotted the foal, he licked his lips eagerly and winked jokingly at me. Why were my insides completely melting right then? Nice job, you guys, Akira said. I had almost forgotten about him. He'd been extremely silent this hunting trip, walking sullenly behind us the whole time. We need to split up. Half the warriors go around them. We need to create a circle-like barrier so that they get trapped and can't escape. I have to give it to him, Akira is seriously one of the smartest wolves, but not in an annoying way, like Loki or Albert, I've ever met. Loki smiled sickly. But I think I should count for this, as I am lead warrior, Akira. Akira's face grew stern. Thankfully for you, I am Beta. And last time I checked, that was a higher ranking than lead warrior, no? I held back a laugh as Loki dropped his gaze and whimpered quietly. Smart move, it was very wrong to question a higher-ranking wolf's ability. This was extremely disrespectful and could result in getting kicked out of the pack. Akira was a master at battle plans. He quickly divided up the warriors and sent them on their way before I even finished counting to 3. Loki was a good lead warrior, but man, you couldn't beat Akira in the hunting and strategy department. This is why Dad had chosen Akira to be the beta. The two were very close. Akira helped Dad start the pack even, so naturally he was second in ranking. What about us? I asked impatiently. I scratched my leg. I was itching to swing into action. The 4 of us will go around that side, Akira said, and pointed his nose toward the river, which curved its way to the lake in a different direction. I gulped. Ash would not enjoy being here. Crossing and swimming rivers were simply not her thing. Swimming for me would be a breeze. I passed the water test with the highest marks in the class, according to the old wise wolf. Howl did well too. But most importantly, I was most excited to see how the professionals did it. Howl, Loki, Akira, and I crept along the valley ridge, keeping a wary eye on the deer. Right before the wide, rushing river, there was a small drop-off. We crept behind it and revised the battle plan. Okay, so Loki and I will go with the warriors. You guys will cause a huge diversion, and while the deer are distracted, we'll swipe in for the attack. Everyone began complaining at once. What? How come I don't get to kill? Howl whined. Why will they be by themselves? Loki demanded. How come I can't be a distraction? I wanted to know. Akira, remaining annoyingly calm, addressed each of our questions. Because you're too young to kill. Because they need to learn responsibility. Because you can't run fast enough. Then he turned around and his eyes flashed in the direction of the woods. I saw him raise his head in the air, and his nose twitched. Change of plans, Akira finally said, flexing his paw. We're all going in. Howl wore an expression of delighted incredulity. I wore something of annoyance and frustration, while Loki looked shocked and surprised. But, Sir Dash the lead warrior began. Do not question my rank. Akira roared, whirling around with incredible speed, and in a flash he had Loki laying on the soggy ground on his back, whimpering as the beta towered over him. Finally Akira relaxed, and he backed off, allowing Loki to get back up. I apologize for reacting that way, Loki, Akira said in a strong voice, but I highly dislike it when a younger wolf is questioning an older wolf's rank. My mistake, Loki wheezed, struggling to pick himself up from the ground. I am sorry, my mistake. Do not make it again. Akira turned to face the deer again. Let's go. Yes, sir, Loki coughed. I suddenly felt bad for him. Akira was the strongest wolf I knew aside from Dad. As we began trudging towards the river, I had to run to keep up with Akira's fast-paced walk. He wore an expression of solemnity and sadness. His dark eyes were off in the distance, as though thinking of something sad. I saw him notice me, and in an attempt to hide his feelings, his ears and tail perked up. What's up, little one? He asked, playfully nudging me. Why aren't we splitting up? I asked. Akira definitely knew something I didn't. He didn't answer when we crossed the river. The beta crossed it swiftly and fast, despite the strong current, much stronger than the river we swam across for one of Grandpa's lessons. I struggled to keep up with him. I almost got washed away, but remembered Ash and used a large boulder sticking out of the water to hop back on the other side. Akira clearly didn't notice my struggling attempts to cross the river. He sneaked up behind a tree very close to the lake, where the deer family still were. All of a sudden, my question was answered. Deep in the woods, I saw a pair of amber-yellow eyes. The next second I heard growling and the unmistakable howl of a wolf. But it wasn't just a wolf. It was a wolf pack. Chapter 10, My first hunting session officially gone wrong. Looks like we have a bit of company, Akira muttered scornfully under his breath. A bit of company? I repeated. Sounds more like a ton to me. TSHT, Akira shushed me. He crouched down low, ready to spring onto the prey. What are they here for? I asked, then answered my own question. Oh no, I said, a terrible feeling of realization falling over me. They're here to get the deer first, aren't they? Duh, Hull said, edging his way towards Akira, nudging me jokingly. Welcome to the wonderful world of hunting, Loki replied. That's when I realized, it must be harder than I thought to be a lead warrior. I've always thought that lead warriors had it easy. They were low in rank and got to command an entire wolf army. But perhaps it was more difficult than it seemed. I glanced back at the thick, dark woods. It was beginning to get dark and the sun was setting. Rays of pumpkin orange and neon pink streaked across the sky, illuminating the mountains in a light, silvery glow. The sky above and the scenery around us was gorgeous, but the glowing yellow eyes staring at us in deep growls coming from the forest was a not-so-gorgeous sight. Akira glanced up at the sky. I say we got an hour before it turns dark, he said, turning towards us, the corners of his mouth twitching. I heard another low growl coming from the dark woods, and suddenly, it seemed like 100 pair of yellow eyes peeked out strikingly against the pitch black. I let out a gasp. There were more of them. I stepped back right into Howl. For the first time in his entire life, he looked frightened. A huge wolf emerged from the darkness. His paws were white, and his fur was cocoa brown and dark yellow with flecks of rusty red mixed in. He had tall, pointy ears and a long snout. His eyes were cloudy white. He looked old but clever. I knew at once that he was a red wolf, and I was shocked. Red wolves were the rarest kind of wolves. There were only a handful left of them on the planet. They'd nearly gotten extinct in the 20th century. And they certainly weren't from this location. Well, the red wolf said in a low, raspy voice. What do we have here? His nose twitched and he paused. I smell the flesh of young cubs. 2, I believe. I also smell the blood of my old enemy. He looked in the direction of the beta. That's when I realized he must have been blind. The hair on Akira's back went up and he snarled, curling his lips, revealing his sharp teeth. Akira? I whispered. Do you know him? Long ago, he answered, not lowering his gaze from the blind red wolf. And how should I put this? An accident occurred and we became mortal frenemies. Frenemies? Hal asked. So you guys used to be friends? Long ago, Akira sneered. Old pals. His name was Amarok. I'm surprised you remembered, Amarok smirked, nose still twitching. I recall you being as dull as ditch water. Akira's eyes widened and he got low, ready to spring on the blind wolf. Amarok sensed some movement and said, There is no need to get all defensive all about it. Turning to Howl and me, he said, Akira was a poor cub growing up. Had bad parents. Didn't have any friends. No one paid attention to him. He would always try to show off and impress wolves, but no one cared. Shut your old mouth, or I will murder you right here, in front of your own pack, with my own paws," Akira hissed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Akira, is this true?" I asked in disbelief. Before Akira could respond, the blind wolf chimed in, "Of course it is. He was weak and selfish back then. Still is, I see. Won't kill off an annoying old wolf. We belonged to the same pack before Dash." "Before what?" Howl asked in awe. "Before I went blind and Akira was kicked out of the pack." Amarok replied, then added, "Just like he deserved. I swear, if you say one more word." Dash Akira was shaking violently, and I thought I saw his eyes fill with tears. "Why did you become enemies, though?" Howl asked, unaware of Akira's behavior. At the same time, I murmured, "Shut up, Howl," and nudged him to stop him. "I was his first friend." "His only friend," Amarok answered. "I was a good wolf who made friends with him when no one else even wanted to lay an eye on him." But a series of tragic events occurred. I went blind, Akira stopped speaking to me, we were both extremely angry, and as a result, he was kicked out of the pack. Just like that. As a cub. If he hadn't found your father, he would have been dead meat. Akira always had anger issues. He howled in laughter. "Cubs," the beta wolf said through clenched teeth, trying to control his anger, "go home. You know the way. I need to settle this." "But," Howl started, pawing him. "This is not a question." Akira snapped. "This is a command. And as your beta, I am in charge. Go back to the den. Do not wait for me. I will know." Akira Dash I managed to steer his gaze away from the smirking old Amarok. Akira stared into my eyes, sky blue into gold yellow, as if petrified. "Will we ever see you again?" "Of course," he mumbled, brushing me away with one paw. "Go now." Howl nudged me and we walked away. I looked back one more time to see Akira staring at me longingly. I didn't realize that would be the last time I would ever see him. Chapter 11, It's Akira, Chief. Howl and I trudged back to camp, whispering worriedly about Akira's strange behavior towards Amarok. I didn't like Amarok, but I didn't hate him either. Akira's past has always been a foggy memory of his that no one knew. I found Amarok interesting, that he was a rare red wolf and that he and Howl used to be best friends as cubs. I wondered what had made them go into a fight. But Amarok's words still pounded in my head. Akira was a poor cub growing up. Had bad parents. Didn't have any friends. No one paid attention to him. He would always try to show off and impress wolves, but no one cared. I was his first friend. His only friend. I was a good wolf who made friends with him when no one else even wanted to lay an eye on him. But then, a series of tragic events occurred. I went blind, Howl stopped speaking to me, we were both extremely angry, and as a result, he was kicked out of the pack. just like that. As a cub. If he hadn't found your father, he would have been dead meat. Akira always had anger issues. His deep, scary laughter echoed in my ears. Had Akira been weak and helpless as a cub? It certainly didn't seem like it. The adult Akira was strong, mature, and confident. It was so unlike of him to see him cowardly stand in front of the old wolf. I glanced over at Howl. The handsome devil looked deep in thought. I nudged him gently. "What you thinking about?" "I don't really know," he admitted after a pause. I mean, it was so weird to see Akira like that. "I think the word is dash." "Afraid," we said in unison. Exactly. Akira's incredible. There's no way he would just go down like that. The events he and Amarok went through must have really traumatized him. If only we knew what happened, I said with a sigh. We approached our territory. The assistant lead warrior, Spirit, smiled at us, gave us a confident nod, and allowed us to walk into the territory. It felt so good to be back home. Our familiar den, the river rushing through the territory, the smooth large rocks by the den, where several wolves were sunning themselves, the training area. Howl and I looked around for our fellow cubs. "Where are they den?" We started towards our home, ready to take a much-needed power nap, when we heard a familiar yoo-hoo. We turned and looked upwards. There were our cubs, on top of the big den. They grinned and waved at us with their paws. "Hey, guys!" I called out, and everyone yelled back, "Hey!" They began to slide down, but I said, "Wait. We're coming up." Howl grinned at me mischievously, and we went around the side of the den, where some misshapen rocks made the perfect grips for climbing. In just a few seconds, us athletics were up there. Howl immediately went over to reunite the three amigos, where Charlie and Blizzard roared in delight, and they began to wrestle on the roof of the cave den in happiness. I went over to Tundra and Lulu and we began to chat rapidly. "Is Akira with you?" Tundra said, glancing over my shoulder to look at the territory below. "No, he stayed behind." I quickly told the girls about the mysterious Amarok and about Akira's past. Whoa! Red wolves are extremely rare these days, especially in these locations. Tundra trailed off. I glanced over at the boy cubs. Howl was telling the same story, but with more flair, drama, and exaggeration. He noticed I was looking at him and glanced at me, smirking warmly. I rolled my eyes at him and grinned back. Tundra noticed my flirting and nudged me sharply. I turned to face her. Her Arctic blue eyes flashed in excitement. "You like Howl," she said, making it sound more of a statement than a question. "What?" "No way," I retorted, doing my best to not look in his direction. "Come on, I can keep a secret." When was the last time I blabbed? If I had a stone for every time I kept one of your secrets, I'd build the world's largest den cave. I don't have a crush on him. Okay, I like him dash. Tundra's eyebrows rose. As a friend. Geez, what's your thing with playing matchmaker? I said, trying to keep the bursting panic from erupting. 'Cause it's fun, she retorted, tossing her head back and shaking it slightly to get her snowy white fur out of her eyes. Tundra was beautiful. I could see why Charlie liked her. She was the only Arctic wolf in the pack, which made her special and extra unique. She had gorgeous snowy white fur and striking light blue eyes. She was tall, quick, and agile. Tundra was also super smart, fun, and had a great sense of humor. She was also super responsible and trustworthy. She was the perfect wolf, but not in an annoying way. Maybe I've mentioned this earlier, but I don't care. Speaking of Charlie, I sneaked a peek at him. He was staring at Tundra in awe. I snuck over to him and nudged his neck sharply. Bruh, stop staring, lover boy. If she ain't got a leech in her fur, don't even look in her direction, I whispered rapidly in his ear. So are why, Charlie drew out. She's just so dash. Oh my God, don't even start. My eyes widened and I backed away in fear. Ever since Charlie first lay his eyes on Tundra, he's been on her. He had a mental list of everything he loved about her. Every day he's been adding one or two things. The list comprised of 1,236 items. Once, because I was bored, I let Charlie recite his list. Hugest mistake of my life. It took him 3.5 hours to finish the list. I had to listen to his dreamy, melted voice as he listed random things about Tundra. I rolled my eyes at him and all of us climbed down the den. We chatted and began to head to the center near the creek because it was nearly time for the old wise wolf's lesson. Just then, Loki and his fellow warriors thundered through the territory like a pack of wild beasts. The ground bounced up and down as Loki howled in terror. Everyone immediately gathered in the middle of the territory. One long howl, 2 barks and a short howl was our emergency signal. This was the second time it had been used. The first time was when a pack of hungry wolves invaded our previous territory, causing us to move to our new place. Between the flurry, the alpha male and alpha female swept through the crowd, looking anxious. At the sight of the highest-ranking wolves, Loki immediately bowed his head in gratitude and respect. The rest of the pack, including the cubs, followed suit. You may rise, the alpha male commanded. Loki, speak. Tell me. What happened? It's Akira, chief, the lead warrior whimpered in a trembling voice, his body shaking and cowardly lowering his head to the ground. He's gone. Chapter 12, Leaving the Territory. I was unable to sleep that night. Dad sent out all of the warriors to search for Akira. After an entire night, the warriors had nothing to report. The beta was gone. I lay in the dark den, the moon giving its light as it illuminated the dark walls of the den. I could hear the cubs' soft breathing and feel their soft fur. my eyes darting back and forth helplessly, from the wolves asleep to the door. The warriors were still out there, searching endlessly for the beta. How could anyone sleep or even close an eye at a time like this? Akira, one of the pack's most valued and respected wolves, was missing, and most of the pack were calmly sleeping in their home, comfortable, warm, and cozy. Akira was probably cold, starving, and wet. It was starting to drizzle. I saw the moon hide behind the dark storm clouds that were rapidly approaching. I decided to go look for Akira. He was probably my favorite wolf of all time. I loved him so much. He was so important to me. He was everything. Akira had always been there for me, no matter what. He had experienced all my firsts, first time swimming, first time walking. He was even there when Mom gave birth to me. He always gave me the best advice during the toughest times and would cheer me up during sad ones. He had a great sense of humor and always made me and the cubs doubled over with laughter. I would sacrifice anything, even myself, for Akira. I slowly got up, making sure not to wake any of the cubs. Charlie's loud snores drowned out the sound of my soft footsteps as I made my way to the den's door. I glanced back at the sleeping wolves one more time. My mom, asleep in the corner with the healers at her side, the Delta and Omega sound asleep, my fellow cubs all together asleep in a small, cluttered pile. I glanced at them and smiled. This would be perhaps the last time I would ever see them again. I turned and glanced up at the sky. The sky was pitch black, streaked with gray and a bit of white. The thundering storm clouds flashed with gold lightning as rain poured heavily. The shining, large round piece of cheese had disappeared long ago behind the clouds, showing no sign of reappearing. I had lost my source of light, but luckily I was trained in the old wise wolf's wilderness survival lessons. I knew how to make a fire and find food even in the most extreme conditions, whether or not. I knew I would be fine. I just had to find a big tree with lots of shade, dig a hole, find a few sticks, sharpen them against my teeth, and voila. I was cold and wet. My wet fur clung to my body fearfully. My tail was stuck between my legs. I heard the rushing river and knew I was near the end of the territory. No cubs were allowed to step across the territory's border without supervision and permission. I was about to break one of our pack's biggest rules for cubs. I stepped out of the border, a heavy feeling enwrapping me as I walked to the forest. Chapter 13. We have a lead. Akira, where are you? I thought in desperation as I raced alongside the wooded trail. The wind howled and the trees swayed softly in the wind as I heard screeches and noises in the dark. The sky was black and thunderous as it seemed to scowl down at me as gold bolts flashed through the air and the storm clouds shook violently. I shuddered and flattened against a large birch tree. I could practically hear my mom screaming my name and my dad shouting for me as I whimpered, my tail stuck between my legs. I desperately wanted to go back. I was only a cub. A small cub whose eyes hadn't even turned golden yellow yet. I wouldn't be able to survive on my own. I barely knew how to hunt. I pressed myself to the ground and curled up into a little furry ball, deciding to wait the storm out. My heart ached as I thought about Akira, the beloved beta, all alone out in the darkness. But what if he was dead? My heart stopped. What if Amarok killed him in vain, as revenge for their childhood years? I couldn't think straight. My heart hammered and bits of snow attached to my gray fur. My eyes started to close and my head drooped. Right as I was going to fall asleep, I heard someone softly say, "Loony Luna?" I glanced up wearily. I could vaguely sort out 7 figures in the storm. Howl, with his gorgeous eyes and muscular build, Ash, looking very small and scared, Lulu, staring at Charlie with her head tilted, Albert, wearing his brainy know-it-all look, Charlie, with his trademark playful look, Blizzard with his cute nose, and Tundra, with her adorable everything. "She guys?" I mumbled, barely managing to stand up. "What's going on?" "We escaped," Hull said flatly. "Oh, okay," Tundra muttered, scooting around the boys to come by my side. "That's totally how we wanted to deliver the news." She began to pick the snow out of my fur using her nose. "We saw that you left and escaped the territory while everyone else was busy with getting into the den," Hull snorted. "Those stupid warriors ain't see anything." "Howl!" Tundra said, shocked. "That's rude." "Why yeah, how Charlie stumbled, glancing at Tundra for approval. "That's not nice. You're just afraid to anger your lovey-dovey crush," Hull mimicked while Blizzard drew out an O sound. Tundra and I glanced at each other and started giggling hysterically. "Shut up." Charlie leapt onto Howl, who fell onto Blizzard, and that started up a fight. Albert sighed and shook his head in disapproval at the boys. He sat down at the base of the tree near us and started to calculate the density and weight of the snow that fell on the ground. Ash started to whimper as the boys' wrestling increased. Lulu seemed in awe of Charlie's playing skills. She continued to shout, "Go Charlie! You can do it!" "Looks like the 3 amigos are at it again," Tundra sighed, continuing to pick flakes of snow out of my fur. I, meanwhile, was extremely angry and frustrated. I mean, what was I supposed to do? The boys were fighting, Tundra was my emotional therapist, and Akira was probably dead somewhere. All things seemed hopeless. Just as I was about to start complaining to Tundra, who could handle anything, I promise, Hull exclaimed, "Luna! Tundra! Get your butts over here!" Excitedly, Tundra and I jumped up and ran over to the boys, who were staring down at the ground. "What?" Tundra asked. Hull looked up at me, grinning broadly. "We have a lead."